Some stories begin loudly, with drama and explosions of emotion. Mine began quietly, so quietly that I didn't realize it had already shaped the rest of my life. My name is Daniel, and for years I believed I understood what love was supposed to feel like. People say love is simple, that it fits neatly into your hands. But love, at least for me, arrived as a whisper. A small presence in my life that grew into something I could never forget. That presence was Michael. Before Michael walked into my life, I was a quiet 15-year-old trying to survive both school hallways and my own thoughts. I lived in a house where emotions were folded away like unused clothes, kept out of sight, kept under control. I learned early how to remain invisible, how to move through entire days without leaving a mark. Then, in the middle of an ordinary school year, Michael arrived as a transfer student that I still remember the first moment I saw him, standing at the classroom doorway, backpack slung casually over one shoulder, eyes scanning the room with a calm confidence I'd never had. His presence shifted the air around him, not loudly, but unmistakably, like a sudden breeze on a warm afternoon. The teacher assigned partners for a group project, and fate, for the first time in my life, seemed to choose my side. Michael sat beside me, offered a small smile, and said, "I'm Michael. Nice to meet you." I managed a quiet, "Nice to meet you too," though my voice echoed strangely inside my chest. What started as awkward introductions soon became steady conversations. At first, we met only to work on the assignment, but our meetings grew longer, stretching into unplanned discussions about music, dreams we were afraid to chase, and small worries we never admitted to anyone else. With Michael, words felt lighter. He listened the way most people don't, fully, softly, as if every sentence mattered, and little by little, something inside me began to change. After school, we often walked home together, even though it added 10 extra minutes to my route. We'd stop by the small store near the corner, splitting a packet of chips while complaining about homework or laughing at things no one else would find funny. Every moment with Michael felt like discovering a room in myself I never knew existed. Then came the rainy afternoon I've replayed in my mind countless times. The sky had opened without warning, forcing us to hide under an old bus stop roof. The rain hammered against the metal sheet above us, loud but strangely peaceful. Michael was sitting beside me, shaking water from his hair, smiling about how unlucky we were. That I looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time, my heart recognized something before my mind caught up. That it hit me gently but undeniably. I loved him, not the childish love people joke about, not the confused love I tried to ignore, but something deeper, something that felt both terrifying and natural. That I didn't tell him, that I didn't tell anyone. Back then, admitting something like that felt like stepping onto thin ice. But even without words, something shifted. I became more aware of the distance between us, the accidental touches, the moments his laughter made my chest tighten. And yet, Michael never pushed, never questioned. Maybe he sensed something. Or maybe he was just kind without knowing the effect he had. As school term neared its end, a quiet dread settled over me. Michael had been acting distracted, checking his phone often. I assumed it was nothing, until he told me the truth. His family was moving abroad. In 2 weeks. The words hit harder than I expected. I nodded, pretending to be supportive, but inside, everything collapsed. We spent his last day together in our usual spot behind the school building. The sun was setting, burning the sky with soft orange light. Michael pulled a small paper star from his pocket and handed it to me. "Just something to remember me by," he said with a half-dash smile. My throat tightened, but I still said nothing. Fear held my confession hostage. And when Michael walked through the school gate for the last time, I watched him go with all the words I never dared to say trapped painfully inside me. That if I had known that silence would echo for years, if I had known that he would return when my life was already tangled in commitments, maybe I would have spoken, but I didn't, and that choice, my silence, became the beginning of everything that came later. This is the story of the boy who stayed in my heart across time, and how his return changed everything. Years passed, and life unfolded in ways I never expected. I became an adult without realizing when childhood ended, carrying Michael's memory quietly in the background of every milestone. Most days, that memory remained peaceful, something I could look back on without pain. Until the day it wasn't peaceful anymore. By my mid-20s, I had built a life that looked stable from the outside. I worked as a graphic designer, rented a small apartment in the city, and lived with my boyfriend, Ethan. Ethan was steady, reliable, and gentle in all the ways the world rarely is. He remembered my coffee habits. He asked about my day. He cared without needing anything in return. And yet, through it all, there were days when I felt like I was performing a version of happiness, not lying, just drifting. Trying to convince myself that comfort was enough. Then one quiet Tuesday afternoon, while finishing a project at work, my phone lit up with a name I hadn't seen in 10 years, Michael. For a long moment, I simply stared at the screen, wondering if my mind was playing tricks on me. But the message was real, short, cautious, familiar. "Daniel, I'm back in the city. I'd love to see you if you're open to it." My heart tightened, awakening something I thought I had buried. I typed and erased replies several times before sending a simple, "Sure. When are you free?" We met the following evening at a small cafe near the old bus station. As I approached, I saw him sitting by the window, and for a moment, the world blurred around the edges. Michael looked older, of course, sharper jawline, more mature posture, a quiet confidence that never left him. But his calm smile was the same, softening everything inside me. "Daniel," he said, standing to hug me. The embrace was brief, but it lingered long enough to unravel something deep in my chest that we talked for over an hour. That he told me about the years abroad, studies, jobs, restless attempts to find belonging. That I told him about my work, my routines, my life with Ethan. Every time Michael laughed, the years between us seemed to shrink. Every time he leaned slightly forward, I felt a remembered warmth drift back in. But there was something else, something unsaid hovering between us. A tension neither of us acknowledged. When we finally stepped outside, Michael touched my shoulder lightly. "I've missed talking to you," he said softly. That I nodded, unable to form a steady response. Walking home afterward, guilt crept up my spine. I had done nothing wrong, just met an old friend. But the way my heart raced, the way my thoughts refused to quiet down, something in me had shifted. Ethan noticed immediately. "You seem distracted," he said gently that night. That I smiled, told him it was nothing, and turned off the lights before he could read too much in my expression. But inside, two timelines were beginning to overlap. Over the next weeks, Michael and I met again. And again. At first, our conversations were casual, work, memories, harmless jokes, but soon those meetings stretched longer, growing more personal. That he asked questions Ethan never thought to ask. That he remembered details I had forgotten. I shared. That he looked at me with an understanding that felt dangerous. One evening, Michael invited me to walk with him along the river. The sky was dim, the streetlights flickering across the water. That we walked slowly, talking about how strange it felt to reconnect after so long. Then, after a quiet moment, Michael said, "I used to wonder what my life would have been like if I never left. I always thought, maybe we would have been closer. Maybe too close." His voice was soft, but his words cut cleanly through the night. That I stopped walking. Michael turned toward me, eyes steady, expression unreadable. "I shouldn't say that," he whispered, "but I think about it." A warmth surged through me, familiar, intoxicating, but right behind it came the sharp edge of guilt. That I forced a shaky laugh, deflecting the moment, but the air between us had already changed. The silence we shared felt like a secret I shouldn't be keeping. That I went home late that night. Ethan was already in bed. That he reached for me sleepily, whispering my name. That I lay beside him, wide awake, heart racing with a truth I didn't want to face. Nothing happened between Michael and me that evening, no touch, no kiss, but something inside me shifted irreversibly. For the first time in years, I felt myself standing on the edge of a line I wasn't sure I could avoid crossing, and deep down, I knew the story was only beginning. I wish I could say I resisted what came next, that I stepped back before the damage spread, but the truth is simpler, and far heavier. Some feelings, once awakened, demand to be faced, even if they ruin everything built around them. I and the days after that river walk with Michael, I felt split between two versions of myself. The Daniel who returned home to Ethan, smiling gently, pretending the world was steady. And the Daniel who felt electrified whenever Michael texted, who reread old messages, who waited too eagerly for the next meeting. That I told myself I was just nostalgic. That I told myself I was only reconnecting with an old friend, but deep inside, I knew nostalgia was merely a disguise. One evening, Michael asked if I could stop by his apartment. That he had just moved into a modest place near the city's edge, and he said he wanted to show me the new neighborhood. That I hesitated. The hesitation felt like a warning, but I went anyway. When I arrived, the apartment smelled faintly of coffee and new paint. The furniture was minimal, the walls mostly empty, except for one framed photo of a sunset over the sea. Michael smiled apologetically. "It's not much yet, but it feels like a new start." We talked while unpacking a few boxes together, joked, laughed, remembered things we had no business remembering, but beneath every sentence was a quiet tension, like a fault line waiting for pressure to crack it open. At one point, Michael handed me a cup of tea, and our fingers brushed. The touch was small, barely a second, but it sent a jolt through me. That he noticed. That I could tell by the way his eyes briefly softened. "Daniel," he said quietly, "can I ask you something?" I swallowed, suddenly unsteady. "What? Are you happy? Truly?" The question cut deeper than any accusation, because Ethan had never asked me that directly, and I wasn't sure what the honest answer was. "I don't know," I whispered. Michael stepped closer, not enough to touch me, but close enough that the air changed between us. "I've tried to be respectful," he said. "I know you're with someone. I know you have a life. But I feel something when I'm with you. Something I shouldn't ignore." My breath caught. That he wasn't confessing to cause chaos. That he wasn't trying to claim me. That he was simply telling the truth out loud, the same truth I'd been wrestling in silence. The moment felt inevitable. Michael reached out gently, giving me time to step back. That I didn't. His hand cupped my jaw with a careful tenderness, as if he feared the memory might disappear, and then he kissed me. That it was soft, trembling, filled with both longing and guilt. That a kiss 10 years overdue. When it ended, I stepped back, breath unsteady. Reality crashed into me like cold water. "I shouldn't have," Michael began. "No," I said, shaking my head. "I shouldn't have let it happen." But even as I said it, I knew the damage was already done. That a line had been crossed that could never be uncrossed. That night, I went home late. Ethan was sitting on the couch, worry written all over his face. "Daniel," he said gently, "we need to talk." My heart pounded. "About what?" "About us. About the distance. About the way you've been looking through me instead of at me." He wasn't angry. That he wasn't accusing. That he was simply hurt, and honest. "Is there someone else?" he asked softly. That I didn't answer, and silence, in that moment, was a confession. Tears welled in Ethan's eyes, though he blinked them back. "I love you," he said, voice cracking. "But I can't be with someone who's halfway somewhere else, or with someone else." The word shattered something fragile inside me that I admitted everything, Michael's return, the complicated emotions, the kiss, not to justify, not to defend, but because Ethan deserved the truth I had been too afraid to confront. That he listened, quietly breaking, then he stood, walked to the bedroom, and began packing a small bag, not in anger, but in acceptance. Before leaving, he looked at me with a heartbreaking gentleness. I hope you figure out what you truly want, Daniel. And I hope it's worth everything you're losing. When the door closed, the silence felt heavier than any punishment that I in the days that followed. I met Michael again, not to rekindle anything, but to face the truth with clarity. That I told him that the love we shared belonged to the past, not the future, that whatever we felt had already taken more than it could ever give. Michael nodded, eyes dimming with quiet understanding. I'll always care for you, he said. But maybe this is where our story ends. And he was right. That I walked away from that meeting with an ache in my chest, part grief, part relief that I had wanted answers. Instead, I found consequences, but endings, no matter how painful, are also beginnings in disguise, and this was the beginning of me finally learning who I was without trying to belong to anyone else.